After many years of waiting, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie has finally hit theaters. Definitely a very anticipated movie for many people, me included, honestly. I had played the games in my childhood. I don't know how fucking old I was in 2014 when that first game came out, but I was I suppose, casual fan of the series. I would play the games, I would watch the stupid MatPat game theory videos trying to decipher the lore of all the games, and waiting for years for this movie to come out, because this thing has been in development hell for a very long time. At one point, Chris Columbus was supposed to direct the movie. That fell through. I don't exactly know what happened with all that. And I do actually think if he had directed the movie, maybe it would have been pretty interesting to see. Maybe it would have been slightly better than what we ended up getting here. But here we are in 2023 with the new Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and I have just seen it and I'm going to talk about it. So, firstly, for fans who are very dedicated, very in tune with a lot of the lore of this movie, you are gonna have to get over the fact that it doesn't really follow the lore of the games at all. And I don't think this movie could have ever really followed the lore, because at a certain point, it gets so incredibly over-convoluted and confusing that I don't even know where they would have been able to start with it. Instead, this movie kind of just brings us the bare bones basics of the FNAF lore. And you know what? For what the movie is, it works. It gives us the lowdown dead kids being put into animatronics, and they terrorize the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. That's basically as much as we get. Oh, and we get the usual, the killer behind it, of course. And it's all well and good. That's really all we get out of it. There's nothing too confusing, which I suppose the reason they did that was to generate the mass general audiences of it. However, at the same time, this movie is incredibly for the fans. There is so much fan service and little hidden Easter eggs that is truly just solely for the fans, that I don't know how many general audiences are really gonna understand some of the things that are put in the actual movie. But even despite me being a casual fan of these games, it was really cool to see. This movie really indulges in its camp aspects, and I really mean its camp aspects. It is kind of a total mess. It doesn't ever really try to take itself seriously, even though, sure, the concept of dead children being murdered is a pretty serious topic, and even I wondered how they were going to handle that with such a low rating. Making the movie PG-13, I think, did kind of hurt the movie a little bit. It would have been nice to see something, for a horror movie, maybe a bit more violence, a bit more gore, because even though the games are technically for children, they do delve into some fucked up places now and then. But I understand why they had to drop the rating to make it low enough. They wanted children to go see it, and my god, did they succeed. When I went to see this movie, my theater, I swear a good 90% of it was just full of children. While thankfully it didn't happen that much, they would constantly make funny references to FNAF memes. And honestly, I think just being in a room full of people that really appreciate FNAF, its lore, and everything about it, it kind of adds to the experience. And I don't think I would have enjoyed it enough if I had have watched it on my own. If I had watched it in my own home on Peacock, even though I don't have, fair enough, but if I had done that, I probably would have liked it a lot less. I think the acting here is okay. It is nothing to ogle at. It is nothing incredibly impressive. Josh Hutcherson gives a fine performance, although at times he can be very wooden. I do feel like he expresses a total of 2 emotions in the whole movie, and he doesn't really have that wide of an expression throughout it, which can give to some kind of underwhelming moments. Despite that though, the character he plays gives an incredible amount of depth. I mean, they really give the character a backstory, which for a horror movie is pretty impressive that they actually decided to do that. It's rare you kind of see horror movie characters get so much lore into them. Usually they're just cannon fodder to die. And trust me, later in the movie we do get a heap of characters that are just there for a scene. They are just there to die, and while most of it is off screen, it's still pretty of a fun scene to see. Matthew Lillard is in the movie too, as I don't really think is a spoiler. Kinda obvious. He of course plays the killer, William Afton, and he is great in this movie. You can just tell from the moment he's on on screen that there's something wrong with him. There's something about him that is not to be trusted. He really hams it up. He knows the movie that he's in, not that it's entirely great, but he knows it's camp, and he is always able to play into that. And when he gets into the movie later on, he brings his unhinged energy that has only been tapped from his days being in Scream, and I'm really glad he was able to have the freedom to do that again, because it works really well here, and it was honestly just such a joy to see him do his thing on screen. The animatronics looked really good in this movie. They were made by Jim Henson Company, which canonically makes them Muppets, which is kind of terrifying to think about, but they all look great. I feel like they were very underutilized. Maybe it was the fact that they were so huge and bulky that they couldn't exactly make them do much. They mostly gave the character of Foxy to do much, but despite that, you didn't really see him move. They would do some lighting tricks where it would cut to black at one stage and then he would be in another place rather than fully seeing him run, which I guess they were constrained. It makes sense why they did that. If anything, they gave more screen time to the fucking cupcake. But the animatronics were good. They do something with them which I can't really express because I don't necessarily want to make this a spoiler review. They do something halfway through the movie which at first I didn't know if I was gonna like, and I'm still unsure if it was the right direction they should have gone, but considering the context of the movie, I suppose it makes sense. But when you watch the movie, you'll understand what I mean. It's really hard to explain without properly spoiling it, but it's just kind of unexpected, and I don't necessarily know why they did it, but it's definitely a new direction, and like I said, it really does change with the lore of what they were going with. Surprise, being a horror movie, it's not really scary at all, like in the slightest. There is moments of jump scares, sure, which never work anyway, but even the jump scares are just not even that good. If anything, it doesn't really even feel like a horror movie. It is the quintessential gateway drug for a child to get into horror. If you have a young kid, like maybe 7 or 8, and you show them this movie, it could easily spark their interest in the horror genre, because there is nothing here that is inherently too terrifying. They really don't bother delving into the darker aspects that these games really do hold, which I do think held it back a lot, but it is what it is. They had to get the market, and it really worked for them because the movie is doing insanely well in the box office. Now, of course, it's not without its flaws. I think the script is admittedly pretty bad, but I've indulged in a lot of camp / B movies, so I think my brain is just wired to being used to that sort of writing where it doesn't really bother me, and I think some of the lines of dialogue are genuinely really bad and just did not work for the movie at all. But then again, for what it is, I guess you can argue it worked. Maybe it was what they were going for. I don't really think there was inherent direction in this movie either. The director, she is inexperienced from what I believe, but there isn't really that much style going on here. There's a couple of Dutch angles, sure, but a lot of the time there will be these shots where the characters will be center frame, and this happens a lot. I've never really seen a movie do it that often. There's just so many medium close-ups. It's almost jarring why they do it so often. Also, the lighting in the movie is incredibly flat. It's like one step above how the original Avengers movie looks, how that looks like it's made for TV movie. The lighting here just, it really doesn't mold well. Despite that and its flaws, I honestly did have a pretty fun time with the movie. I don't know what is wrong with me, but there was some aspects of it I really enjoyed. I wasn't scared at all, but then again, going into it, I knew I wasn't gonna be. It's a Five Nights at Freddy's movie. The games are not scary, so the movie was never gonna be scary. Look, if you are a fan of the games, if you're a hardcore fan, I'm not sure how you would appreciate about the lore changes, but if you're a fan of these games, I can guarantee that a lot of people are gonna enjoy it. I'm giving Five Nights at Freddy's 3.5 stars. It's a really fun, campy, quote-unquote horror movie that, like I said before, is a perfect gateway drug for children getting into horror movies. It's going to be up there with the likes of Coraline, I guess maybe Nightmare Before Christmas, I don't know. Kind of similar to Goosebumps in a way. It's under that type of horror, and if that bothers you, fair enough. It bothered me at first, but despite that, it made for a pretty fun time, and I'm just now really curious to see what they'll do in the sequels.